You are now listening to Mark's Unexplained World by Mark the Medium, available on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Prime, Podbean and most other podcast platforms. Tonight's episode is about what happened to Jeanette DePalmer. So it's over to you now, Mark.
Jeanette DePalmer was an American teenager who is believed to have been murdered sometime on or around the 7th of August in 1972 in Springfield, New Jersey in the United States. Her body was discovered a month later on a cliff known to the locals as the Devil's Teeth, which is located in Springfield's Houdaille Quarry, with the events of her death being the subject of sensationalised coverage in local media for having rumoured connections to alleged occult activity in the area. And, according to several witnesses who were at the scene of her decomposing body, Jeanette DePalmer's skeletal remains were surrounded by a series of strange and possibly occult objects. The case, which to this day is still currently unsolved, has become a matter of significant controversy, due in part to its coverage in both a magazine that deals with unexplained phenomena called Weird NJ, and in a 2015 book called Death on the Devil's Teeth, which proposed several theories to Jeanette's loss of life, but has no confirmed conclusions. Around 2 weeks after the discovery of Jeanette DePalmer's remains, several newspapers began reporting that she may have been the victim of an occult sacrifice, which may have been carried out by either Satanists or even by a local coven of witches. And years later, during the spring of 2021, it was even thought that she may have been a victim of the serial murderer Richard Cottingham, who was also known as the Torso Killer. Greetings, Unexplainers. Thank you for tuning in again and listening to this unsolved mystery episode of Mark's Unexplained World. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a medium, a ufologist, a true crime buff, and a lover of all things odd. But just to give you a better idea of who I am and what I do, every week, usually on a Tuesday night, allowing for bank holidays and busy weekends, I do a podcast on the many wide and various subjects that fall under the Unexplained banner. These include ufology, hauntings, disasters, and all sorts of other paranormal phenomena, including true crime, unsolved crime, serial killers, and the occasional missing person that often goes unnoticed. So, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review or an opinion of the episode's subject that I can reply to, a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. Or, if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. In this episode, I'm going to tell you about the unexplained story surrounding what happened to Jeanette DePalmer. And this week's necessary disclaimer. This story is a tale that sadly involves missing people, cults, and the murder of a young female, so it may prove upsetting to some. You listen at your own discretion. Also, all opinions and comments are strictly my own, but the facts of the case remain. I also apologise if I pronounce anything incorrectly. My English, although it is my first and only language, has a great deal of willpower. However, it also has a great deal of won't power. But anyway, let us get back to the story. Jeanette Christine DePalmer was a Jersey City native and was the beloved daughter of Salvatore DePalmer Sr. and Florence M. Trape DePalmer, who brought her into the world on the 3rd of August in 1956. She also lived with her two brothers named Salvatore Jr. and John, and by all accounts the DePalmer household was built with love and care, and whilst Jeanette DePalmer was growing up in the house on Clearview Road in Springfield Township, New Jersey, she had big dreams and ambition, along with a lot of potential to make a name for herself in her future. She also, seemingly during her teens, dated for a while with a guy named Wayne Tate. In the afternoon of the 7th of August in 1972, 16-year-old Jeanette DePalmer had plans to visit one of her friends. So she left her Springfield Township residence and told her mother, Florence DePalmer, that she would take a train to her friend's home. However, both Jeanette's friend and her parents became concerned when she did not arrive at her friend's house as planned, or return to her Springfield residence later that same evening. So Jeanette's parents, Salvatore and Florence DePalmer, then spent the remainder of the day reaching out to her other friends and acquaintances in order to try and find out the whereabouts of their missing daughter. But alas, to no avail. So, the following day, both Salvatore and Florence DePalmer, Jeanette's parents, reported their missing daughter to the Springfield Police Department. However, during the investigators and local searchers working hard together to try and find the missing 16-year-old, there seemed to be no trace of her anywhere, not even near the area where she was last seen. Approximately 6 weeks later, on the 19th of September, Jeanette DePalmer's remains were finally found on top of a cliff inside the Springfield's Houdaille Quarry, otherwise known as the Devil's Teeth, after a local dog found her decomposing right forearm and then handed it to its owner. The owner, soon after realising what it was, then quickly informed law enforcement, who then hastily set a squad over to the cadaver area. According to several witnesses who were already at the scene where Jeanette DePalmer's decomposing body was found, her body was surrounded by a series of strange and possibly occult objects, with most descriptions varying, but the most commonly agreed upon account states that her remains were found inside a coffin-shaped perimeter of fallen branches and logs, and inside this perimeter were several small makeshift wooden crosses. But there were also reports by some other Springfield residents that later claimed Jeanette DePalmer's remains were found lying on a pentagram surrounded by mutilated animal remains. However, the Springfield law enforcement and authorities have denied that this was the case. And, yes, there's more, there was also further controversy when it was discovered that Jeanette DePalmer's remains had been found on a cliff known to the locals for several decades as the Devil's Teeth. Now, I would normally give you a little bit of interesting information here regarding the area called the Devil's Teeth, which is located in the Springfield's Houdaille Quarry itself and where Jeanette's body was found. But I cannot find any information, either online or through my vast book collection on strange places and things, as to why the locals gave it this name. In fact, the closest thing I could come up with was the Devil's Teeth is referring to either the name of a type of fungus called Hynelium pecki, or that it may be referring to a nickname given to a breed of shark. So obviously, if anyone does have any idea, please let me know in the comments section below, and I will be eternally grateful. Anyway, what I can do as a small compensation, and in order to take us nicely into part 2 of this podcast, is give you some information on the Springfield's Houdaille Quarry, which is otherwise known to the locals as the Devil's Teeth. So here it goes. The Houdaille Quarry is 120-acre former... Sorry, I'll do that again. The Houdaille Quarry is a 120-acre former rock quarry located in the Springfield Township, Union County in New Jersey, with it bordering the northern edge of the Baltzerol Golf Club. It is known by Union County, New Jersey, and is typically closed to the public, aside from the occasional ecological tour, with it also being known as the Grand Canyon of Union County. The Springfield Environmental Commission, which conducts foliage walks in the former quarry, has described it as an, and I quote,
ecologically unique wild area in Springfield, located between Route 78 and Mount View Road, with trails to a deep basin and to a beautiful pond with wild turkeys, foxes, coyotes and colourful migrating birds have been spotted.
Today, as well as the ecological tours, of course, Houdaille is also used as Springfield County's largest leaf composting operation. After this first short break, in part 2, we will look at the police investigation into the death of Jeanette DePalmer and some of these supernatural theories that were rumoured to be involved.
This show is brought to you courtesy of Neil Packer and the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. Find them online at www.hauntedresearchcentre.com or at 9 to 11 Regent Street, Hinckley, LE10 1AW. Open on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. for guided tours of the haunted rooms at just £3 per person. Booking is essential at all times, and over 16s only, please, unless accompanied by an adult. The haunted rooms are extremely haunted, and paranormal activity could, and has, taken place at any time. Some areas and particular objects or items can be quite scary and unnerving. Membership is available for £25 to qualify for selective offers. And why not download the app, available on both iOS and Android, for only $3.99, to keep up to date with what is coming up at the centre.
The Springfield Police Department began an investigation immediately after Jeanette DePalmer's death and after an autopsy was unable to reveal the cause. Her remains, including her clothing, showed no evidence of bone fractures, bullet or knife wounds, and there was no drug paraphernalia found on or around the body. But, and for reasons which remain undisclosed at the point of writing this show, the coroner did suspect that Jeanette DePalmer's cause of death may be due to strangulation, which then led the Union County Prosecutor's Office to treat the case as an unsolved homicide. One of the other unusual things that was discovered during Jeanette DePalmer's autopsy was an unusually high amount of lead in her remains, with the coroner having no explanation for this occurrence either. During the early days of the investigation into Jeanette DePalmer's homicide, the Springfield Police Department received a tip regarding a homeless man living in the woods near the Springfield's Houdaille Quarry. This homeless man was simply known to the locals as Red, and it was alleged that this Red had fled from his campsite in the woods very shortly after Jeanette DePalmer went missing. And while this led into Red's actions initially looking promising to the Springfield law enforcement, the Union County Prosecutor's Office ultimately decided that Red had nothing to do with Jeanette DePalmer's death. So it was back to the old drawing board for the Springfield police, and while investigators continued to attempt to find more leads, due to a lack of tips from the public, along with inconsistent stories told to the police by her family, friends and peers, the case eventually went cold. Approximately 2 weeks after the discovery of Jeanette DePalmer's decomposing body was found, several newspapers, including the New York Star-Ledger and the New York Daily News, began reporting that she may have been the victim of an occult sacrifice carried out by either Satanists or by a local coven of witches who operated inside the nearby large nature reserve in Union County called the Watchung Reservation. I want to take a short break from the story here and just talk a little bit about both Satanism and witches. So let's start with Satanism. Now, according to Wikipedia, Satanism refers to a group of religious, ideological or philosophical beliefs based on, well, Satan. And because of its ties to the historical Abrahamic religious figure, Satanism, as well as other religious, ideological or philosophical beliefs that align with it, is considered a countercultural Abrahamic religion. Satan is associated with the devil in Christianity, who is a fallen angel regarded as the chief of the demons who tempt humans into sin. Satan is also associated with the devil in Islam, a jinn or djinn, who has rebelled against God, the leader of the devils, or someone who is made of fire and who was cast out of heaven because he refused to bow before the newly created Adam and incites humans to sin. The phenomenon of Satanism shares historical connections and family resemblances with the left-hand path melee of other occult figures such as Asmodeus, Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, Samuel, Lilith, Lucifer, Hesate and Set. Self-identifying Satanism is a relatively modern phenomena largely attributed to the 1966 founding of the Church of Satan by Anton LaVey in the United States, which are an atheistic group that do not believe in Satan being a supernatural being. Accusations of groups who engage in devil worship have echoed throughout much of Christian history, and during the Middle Ages, the Inquisition, led by the Catholic Church, alleged that various heretical Christian sects and groups, such as the Knights Templar and the Cathars, performed secret satanic rituals. Since the 19th century, various small religious groups have emerged that identify as Satanist or use satanic iconography, and while the groups that appeared after the 1960s differed greatly, they can be broadly divided into atheistic Satanism and theistic Satanism. Contemporary religious Satanism is predominantly an American phenomena, although the rise of globalization and the internet have seen these ideas spread to other parts of the world. And what about witches? Well, again, according to Wikipedia, witchcraft is the use of magic by a person who calls themselves, well, a witch. Traditionally, witchcraft means the use of magic to inflict supernatural harm or misfortune onto others, and this remains its most common and widespread meaning today. But according to the Encyclopaedia Britannica, and I quote,
"Witchcraft thus defined exists more in the imagination,"
it continues, and again I quote,
"has constituted for many cultures a viable explanation of evil in the world."
The belief in witches has been found throughout history in a great number of societies worldwide, with most of these societies having used protective magic or counter-magic against witchcraft, and have shunned, banished, imprisoned, physically punished and or killed alleged witches. Anthropologists use the term witchcraft for similar beliefs about harmful occult practices in different cultures. Belief in witchcraft as being malevolent magic is attested from ancient Mesopotamia, and in Europe, beliefs in witches traces back to classical antiquity. In medieval and early modern Europe, accused witches were often women who were believed to have secretly used black magic, or witchcraft even, against their own community. Witches were sometimes said to have communed with demons or with the devil, though anthropologist Jean Lafontaine notes that such accusations were mainly made against perceived, and I quote,
"enemies of the church."
Suspected witches were often prosecuted and punished if found guilty, or even if they were simply believed to be guilty. European witch hunts and witch trials in the early modern period led to tens of thousands of executions, and while magical healers and midwives were sometimes accused of witchcraft themselves, they actually made up a minority of those accused. Since the 1930s, followers of certain kinds of modern paganism identify as witches and redefine the term witchcraft as part of their neo-pagan beliefs and practices, while other neo-pagans avoid the term due to its negative connotations. This coverage, which was spurred on by the reports of several newspapers, which included the aforementioned New York Star-Ledger and the New York Daily News, regarding Jeanette DePalmer's remains being found surrounded by strange objects, was also egged on by the theories of the local pastor, a man named James Tate, at the DePalmer's Families Assemblies of God Church, with the rumours regarding the case setting off a panic in several other Union communities, which were at the time still recovering from the shock of the John List murders only 10 months earlier. On an interesting side note, John Emil List was an American mass murderer and a long-time fugitive who, on the 9th of November in 1971, killed his wife, mother and 3 children at their home in Westfield, New Jersey, and then disappeared, with it being nearly a month passing before anyone suspected that anything was amiss. John List then assumed a new identity, remarried and eluded justice for nearly 18 years. He was finally apprehended in Virginia on the 1st of June in 1989 after the story of his murders was broadcast on the television programme called America's Most Wanted. After his extradition to New Jersey, he was convicted on 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive terms of life imprisonment, making him ineligible for parole for nearly 75 years. However, at the age of 82, John List ended his life by dying in prison back in 2008. After this second short break, in part 3, we will look at the aftermath of the Jeanette DePalmer homicide and the possible connections of her death to Richard Cottingham, who was also known as the Torso Killer.
Fright Nights was established in 1999 as the first company in the world to offer overnight ghost hunt experiences to the general public, pioneering paranormal events since the last century. Fright Nights operate at hundreds of the UK's most haunted and exclusive venues. All events have their own team of experienced paranormal investigators, mediums and psychics. They have a VIP members club for regular returning guests, offering loyalty discounts and exclusive invitation-only events. They can also host private events for your family and friends. You can contact them on 07 852 998 628 or email them at office@frightnights.co.uk or take a look at their website at www.frightnights.co.uk, where you can see the many locations they investigate and learn about them and the opportunities they have available. Hundreds of ghost hunters join Fright Nights every month for the most thrilling ghost hunting experiences they'll never forget. If you haven't been on a ghost hunt before, then why not join them to see what it's all about? Why not visit their social media sites for up-to-date information on all the places they visit and to see what's coming up in the future? They look forward to seeing you all soon. Fright Nights Ghost Hunting Events. Remember, only the original will do.
Before I get back into the Jeanette DePalmer story, let us first take a potted dive into the magazine called Weird NJ. Well, Weird NJ, which is sometimes abbreviated to just WNJ, is a semi-annual magazine that chronicles local events, purported hauntings, ghost stories, folklore, unusual places or events, and other peculiarities in New Jersey. The magazine itself originated back in 1989 as a newsletter sent to friends by the author Mark Moran and the graphic artist Mark Skirman. But as its popularity grew, it suddenly became a public magazine, which ended up being published twice a year, both in the May and in the October. In its pages of unexplained phenomena, it looks at things like abandoned places, eerie experiences, and unique people, along with strange landmarks, with past issues of the magazine having covered everything from the Jersey Devil and UFO sightings to abandoned night missile silos to the legend of the Hookerman Lights and the life of Zippy the Pinhead. The magazine popularity grew so much that it ended up spawning a series of books called Weird US, which chronicled oddities from individual states in the United States aside from New Jersey, which then in turn led to a television series that ended up being aired on the History Channel. The popularity of the magazine has inspired a community of fans of both the author Mark Moran and the graphic artist Mark Skirman's work. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Weird NJ magazine began to report on what by now was a decades-old cold case of Jeanette DePalmer after receiving several anonymous letters regarding her death. Editor and co-founder of the Weird NJ magazine, Mark Moran, began an investigation into the case and wrote about the many purportedly suspicious details which included the allegation that the Springfield police had destroyed the case file. However, the Springfield Police Department maintains that the case file was in fact lost in 1999 due to the flooding caused by Hurricane Floyd, but others allege that a copy of it still exists on file. On an interesting side note here, Hurricane Floyd was a very powerful and large tropical cyclone which struck the Bahamas and the east coast of the United States, with it being the 6th named storm, 4th hurricane and 3rd major hurricane in the 1999 Atlantic hurricane season. Hurricane Floyd triggered the 4th largest evacuation in US history, behind Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Gustav and Hurricane Rita, when 2.6 million coastal residents of 5 states were ordered from their homes as it approached. You probably just heard a helicopter going over. I do apologise. I must speak to Waltham.
They're still looking for us.
Yeah. The hurricane formed off the coast of Africa and lasted from the 7th to the 19th of September 1999, becoming extratropical after the 17th of September, peaking in strength as a very strong Category 4 hurricane. It was among the largest Atlantic hurricanes of its strength ever recorded in terms of gale force diameter. Mark Moran eventually teamed up with the Weird NJ correspondent and journalist Jess P. Pollack to write the book Death on the Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. Throughout the course of Pollack and Moran's research, they discovered several instances of a possible cover-up of the Jeanette DePalmer case, along with connections to other unsolved murders and previously unknown suspects, and eventually in the September of 2024, Weird NJ reported that they had acquired copies of DePalmer's case file from the Union County Prosecutor's Office. According to the Weird NJ magazine, when they reviewed the photographs from the crime scene, they stated that they were, and I quote,
confident that there was no occult activity involved in her death.
The magazine further stated they found no evidence of, and again I quote,
crosses made from sticks and twigs,
and or a
halo of stones or animal sacrifices
that were allegedly found near the body in the crime scene photographs. A gentleman called Edward Salzano, who was a friend of the DePalmer family, although he never personally met Jeanette, took it upon himself to research the case and sued the Union County Prosecutor's Office to test Jeanette DePalmer's clothing for DNA. Edward Salzano was then given a box of documents that contained both the FBI crime lab reports and the medical examiner's report, with the crime lab report stating that the stains found in her underwear, bra, blouse and slacks were, and I quote,
too decomposed for conclusive blood and semen examinations.
Back in 1972. During the spring of 2021, the convicted New Jersey serial killer Richard Cottingham, who is also known as the Torso Killer, made a series of written statements to the aforementioned Weird NJ correspondent and journalist Jess P. Pollack, alluding to him having possibly abducted and killed Jeanette DePalmer while she was hitchhiking in New Jersey. On my last but interesting side note for this episode, Richard Francis Cottingham, who was born on the 25th of November in 1946, is an American serial killer who was convicted in not only New York of 6 murders that were committed between 1972 and 1980, but he was also convicted of 12 murders in New Jersey between 1967 and 1978. He was nicknamed by the media as both the Torso Killer and the Times Square Ripper because some of the murders he was convicted of included mutilation. Richard Cottingham's confirmed killings resulted in 9 convictions and a further 8 confessions under non-prosecution agreements, leading to him serving multiple life sentences in New Jersey prisons. In 2009, decades after his first 5 murder convictions, Richard Cottingham told a journalist he had committed at least 80 perfect murders of women in various regions of the United States. The written statements given by Richard Cottingham to the aforementioned Weird NJ correspondent and journalist Jess P. Pollock, alluding to him having possibly abducted and killed Jeanette DePalmer while she was hitchhiking in New Jersey, was then forwarded by Jess P. Pollock to the Union County Prosecutor's Office after Richard Cottingham had agreed to speak with the investigators. Richard Cottingham's statements regarding Jeanette's abduction and murder were later printed in the 2022 updated and revised edition of the aforementioned Mark Moran and Jess P. Pollock book, Death on the Devil's Teeth, The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. But as of December 2022, no updates to the case have been given by law enforcement. In 2021, the New York Daily News mentioned that an organisation called Justice for Jeanette DePalmer was dedicated to keeping her memory alive, with the organisers continuing to look for clues, even as it passes its half-century mark. And various other newspapers over time have also kept the Jeanette DePalmer story alive, with updated articles printed in the Daily Beast in 2022 and the Mirror in 2024.
Thank you all for taking the time out to listen to this episode of Mark's Unexplained World. In our next episode, show number 146, we are going to be looking at the death smog of Donora. In 1948, Donora smog was a phenomenon that killed 20 people and caused respiratory problems for another 6,000 of the 14,000 people living in Donora, Pennsylvania at the time. Even 10 years after the incident, mortality rates in Donora were significantly higher than those in other communities nearby. 60 years later, the incident was described by the New York Times as one of the worst air pollution disasters in the nation's history.
This show was written and researched by myself, Mark Hughes, and proofread and edited by Linda Hughes. The helicopter, I don't know who was flying that at the time, but anyway. The actors in this episode were Mark Hughes, Linda Hughes and Denise Poolar, with special thanks, of course, to Neil Packer and the staff at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley. And, of course, a big thank you to everyone for listening. We never run out of ideas here at the office for Mark's Unexplained World podcast, but if you know of any other intriguing stories under the Unexplained banner, including ufology, hauntings, disasters, and any other sort of paranormal phenomena, as well as any true crime, unsolved crime and missing people, just drop me a direct message, or you can put something in the comments below, and I'll see what I can do. I'll also include the name of the person who suggested the idea in the end of the credits of the podcast, if they want me to, of course. And again, just to add, if you are listening to this show on YouTube, please give us a review and a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are listening on any of the other podcast platforms, again, give us a like and a follow. I thank you in advance. Mark's Unexplained World, because there's more to the paranormal than meets the third eye. And remember, guys, keep it real, because being real is better than being perfect. This show and all its contents are covered by basic copyright of Mark the Medium.